Hi, I'm Patrick Manning at Black Desert Resort. We are proud sponsors of Beyond the Game. I recognize that wins aren't always measured by points. Scoreboards don't always define champions, but the story this athlete has to tell, it does. This is why Black Desert Golf Course is proud to sponsor Beyond the Game to share this inspiring story with you. Please enjoy.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong, and I'm happy to be back again for another episode. It's good to be back. We got football going, and obviously that makes things very, very good for us to talk about things. So I'm excited to be able to keep going with this and talk kind of some developments in fall camp. And there's not a ton. I mean, admittedly, there's just not a ton right now with Utah. They have a lot of depth and a lot of talent, and it's a lot of the same stuff from last year, but there are definitely updates, and we'll talk about that. So before we do that, though, I want to tell you about our partners, Black Desert, who are helping with the KSL.com Beyond the Game video series. The videos highlight various athletes and give an inside look into their life. Recently, we talked with former Utah offensive lineman Garrett Bowles about how a second chance at life allowed him to pay it forward to troubled youth. You can check out that video and many others on KSL.com. Black Desert is a new resort destination in St. George that features a championship Tom Weiskopf 19-hole golf course that combines a private club feel with destination resort golf amid lava fields and 360-degree vistas. Black Desert is changing entertainment in southern Utah, and they're just beginning. Black Desert, where remarkable is within reach. Home of the Black Desert Championship PGA Tour. All right, so let's get back at this. We'll talk about fall camp stuff, but first I wanted to kind of jump into one of the developments of this week, and that was the USA Today Coaches Poll, which is now called the US LBM Coaches Poll. Can we be done with this stuff? Just call it the Coaches Poll. I mean, that's what everybody's going to call it, but I understand corporate sponsors, and I understand that, and I'm one that's a proponent of being able to get money to help fund what we need to do. Especially on the sports side, to make sure that it keeps going. But sometimes it's kind of a little ridiculous to call it that. So, tirade over, but I think it's just kind of a dumb name. Regardless, Utah is ranked number 13. They're the highest-ranked team in the Big 12. There's 4 other teams from the Big 12 that were ranked, including Kansas State at 17, Oklahoma State at 18, Arizona 21, and Kansas at 24. There was a handful of other teams that were receiving votes, and that's to be expected. That's including West Virginia, Iowa State, UCF, Texas Tech, and Colorado. So there's a handful there. The Big 12 actually was had the third most teams out of the conferences, as can be expected. The SEC and Big 10 make up the majority of that. If anything, they make up the majority of the top 10. I mean, as to be expected, that's what conference realignment has been all about. Surprisingly, and maybe not surprisingly, there were no G5 teams included in the top 25. Memphis was the highest one to receive votes. Boise State was a little close to that too. But I think you're starting to see where these polls, these top 25s, are very much so going to be Power 4 teams, I guess is how we're designating them now. But that's just kind of the lay of the land right now. I think that's how it's going to go. So it's interesting. I mean, we don't take a lot of stock to preseason polls, coaches polls especially. These are essentially members of the athletic staff that are putting these together. It's not the actual coach. Maybe some programs ask their coach, how they would rank teams. I would be surprised, knowing how that works a little bit firsthand. I don't see that happening. So this is just what somebody on staff decided to do. Utah is not included in it this year. They had a voting member the last few years, but there's nobody on the Utah staff that's voting in this year's coaches poll. So, it is what it is. With this, I kind of wanted to jump into this a little bit and look at the playoff scenarios. If you were to say this was the final top 25, right? Like this is the final one as they're about to do the selection committee. It presents a little bit of a look at kind of how these teams are going to jockey for position in this 12-team playoff. And there's a little bit difference to this, right? You know, the 4 top teams from each conference, so that doesn't mean the 4 top teams like 1 through 4. It means the 4 top teams from all of the 4 top conferences, they get those first 4 byes. So they're 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then everybody else is essentially slotted based on where they land in the poll, barring the 5th conference champion or that they automatically get in. That doesn't mean that they are now slated number 5. They could still be 12 if they are below all those other teams. But that's how it goes. So I kind of pulled this out a little bit to kind of look at what the playoff scenario would be if this is supposed to be the final one, right? So you look at it, the byes would be Georgia, they win the SEC, Ohio State, they win the Big Ten, Florida State, they win the ACC, and Utah, they win the Big 12. So those are your 4 top seeds. Utah would get a first-round bye in the playoffs, which unfortunately means you wouldn't get a game in Salt Lake City, right? You wouldn't have somebody coming to town and being able to play Utah in the first round of the playoffs. Utah would have to wait and be in one of those the bowl games that are designated something like the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, Peach Bowl, those types of venues. So it'd be your traditional New Year's 6 type bowl games, but I think Utah would be fine with that, knowing that they won the conference. They get an opportunity to be in the quarterfinal round of the playoff and have a chance to play into the semifinals. I think that's a great opportunity and something they would love. So beyond that, though, the way it would be slated, you would have Oregon as a number 5, Texas 6, Alabama 7, Ole Miss 8, Notre Dame 9, Michigan 10, Penn State 11, and Memphis, even though they weren't ranked in the top 25, they were the highest G5 team, so we're going to put them in there at number 12. That's how they would land. So even though they could be outside of the top 25, because they would be the highest vote getter of this scenario, they would be in the conference or the college football playoffs. So interesting situation there. The matchups would be pretty interesting, honestly. Like I think these would be a great opening round of the playoffs. You would have Oregon playing Memphis in the first round, and the winner would go on to face Utah. Texas and Penn State would open up their matchup, with the winner of that going on to play Florida State. Alabama would play Michigan, and the winner would go play Ohio State. Now, that pairing all around would be phenomenal. Alabama, Ohio State's always a good one. But then you get a potential rematch of the rivalry game, Michigan and Ohio State. Having that in the college football playoffs would be insane. And then you get Ole Miss playing Notre Dame for a chance to go up against Georgia. You can see why the 12-team playoff is attractive to people, right? I understand there's some people that still love the 4-team playoff. I'm not going to get into that. But you can see that a lot of these are those blue blood teams, right? You've got a lot of these teams that they're going to be in this conversation regardless of what happens. They're going to be the teams that are jockeying for position, where to go. Any of these teams in the top 15, I would say initially, are most likely going to be in that conversation. That's not to say that teams outside of the top 15 aren't. But you can kind of get the point that most of these teams are going to stay at the top, barring some injuries or some other stuff. So it's a good opportunity for Utah, but looking at this, it's a tough scenario, right? You've got to battle with the SEC and the Big Ten and really try to fight to get an at-large bid unless you win the conference. In this scenario, Utah is the only team from the Big 12 coming to the playoffs. There's no Kansas State. There's no Oklahoma State. Obviously, there's going to be changes in how this is made up, and as the games are getting played, maybe some teams sneak up into those top 10 ranges from the Big 12. But this is the challenge where the 12-team playoffs continues to just grow for the SEC and Big 10. They get more teams in there. They don't have a lot of problems that way, and everybody else is left out on the outside. I mean, it's the same for the ACC. Florida State is the only team from the ACC that would be included in there. Notre Dame gets their at-large bid, and they have some ties with the ACC, but they're independent in football. So this is very much so a boon for the SEC and the Big Ten, and so it becomes a challenge for teams that don't win the conference to be able to be in there. With that said, let's say Utah doesn't win the conference championship. If they can remain in that top 10 spot, they're going to be fine. And that's a challenge with losing a conference championship. But there's opportunities there. It's just a matter of how this shakes out, and I'm curious to see how it goes. So that's just looking at it from the coaches poll. Coaches poll is always one that, it can be a guide, but the second the AP poll comes out, I feel like everybody kind of dismisses it. The AP poll comes out next Monday at 10 a.m. I'll have my AP ballot as an AP voter out maybe at the end of this week, if not Monday morning. We'll see how I decide to go with it. Try to get it done. So that's kind of where it goes. Once the AP poll comes out, that's where people take a little bit more stock into that. I know a lot of people are frustrated with preseason polls and polls in general at the first few weeks. Really, you just have to look at them as kind of how people are viewing your program. Utah's obviously going to be viewed highly. The fact that they're expected to win the conference, that shows that they're going to be viewed high and they're going to be inside the top 15 somewhere. Generally speaking, the coaches poll traditionally ranks Utah lower, so you'll probably see Utah a little higher in the AP, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're anywhere in that range. It honestly doesn't matter. Utah, as long as they continue to win, they're going to be wherever they need to, and they'll be fine. So, by the end of the season with these polls, it works its way out, right? Like, you can have a team that's in there and you're like, there's no way they're a top 10 team, and then they go on to win or lose, and it kind of bears itself out that way, and it'll all make sense. So you have those until the actual college football playoff selection committee chooses theirs, November-ish, late October, and then that becomes the official one, and we'll kind of go from there. But this is an opportunity for Utah, right? You win the conference, you're an automatic bye in the playoffs, you're set. You get that first round bye, and everything's good. But you can still play into it if you're still one of those top 10-ish teams. So good opportunity for Utah if they can take care of business. So speaking of Utah, let's get into fall camp. This is the second week of fall camp. So the first week is generally kind of the slower portion. It's not slow for the players. These guys have a pretty massive install. The coaches are pushing them and forcing them to really acclimate to what the season is going to be like, right? So there's a lot of conditioning, there's a lot of prep, and they're pushing these guys to their limits, essentially, where it's not going to be easy. This is still that ramp-up period that Kyle had talked about, where they're going to change how they did it, right? They had 2 days on, took a day off, 3 days on, took a day off, 4 days on, and then it kind of goes into a traditional, everyday type scenario. And so that's kind of how the makeup will be. This has been a tough task, right? Like, pads came on this week. This is where they're going to be. It's going to be much more of a challenge now that you're starting to see these guys hit each other more. You're going to start seeing probably more injuries, simply because that's just the nature of it. Utah's still trying to do whatever they can to limit those, but you're going to see them, right? It's probably just some nicks here and there, and maybe there's some bigger injuries. You hope not, especially barring what happened last year, but that's where we're going to be right now. So there's going to start to be a little bit more separation. We're going to start hearing Kyle Whittingham talk about a little bit more guys and cementing their roles in the depth chart and things that way. But there's still not a full pecking order in a lot of these positions. Utah is going to have their first full scrimmage on Thursday. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this on a Wednesday, and that's really where things are going to kind of start divvying up for those 1s, 2s, 3s, and everybody else falling in line after that. They really want to have everything settled by Monday to make sure that they really hit the ground running, right? It's not quite game mode, right? They have a couple weeks until they get into that, where they start focusing on their opponents and doing that. But right now it's still the conditioning, trying to figure out, the jockeying for positions and different things that way. So, but with that said, Kyle talked about how the QB battle, the QB2 battle, we obviously know Cam is that number one guy. The QB2 battle, he says it's shaping up, and that he saw a little bit of separation last week. Nothing that is going to give them the understanding that they need to kind of stop that competition, right? It's not like they've found a guy that they feel like, at least they're not announcing that publicly. They wanted to wait for this week, get into that scrimmage. It's one thing to look good in scrimmage where you're not really going through full motions, where you're not getting tackled, doing different things like that, and going through a scrimmage where you're able to actually manage it in a much, much more game-like setting, right? These quarterbacks still aren't going to be tackled. Utah's not putting them through that, so that's not going to happen. but you can at least get an idea with how they process information, right? Are they getting sacked, touch sacks, or are they, going through their progressions? That's how it's going to be. But you've got three quarterbacks especially. You got Sam Heward, you've got Brandon Rose, and Isaac Wilson, who are all battling equally for this, right? Kyle says it's not a dead heat anymore, but at the same time, he's not ready to go public with who he thinks it's going to be, and so we're going to see some of that on after Thursday. So Monday, I'm hoping, Kyle said this before and then decides to keep it close to the vest. With a backup position, I have to imagine he'd be a little bit more open because there's really not any gamesmanship to withholding that information unless he honestly wants to keep that close to the vest for whatever reason he wants to, and that happens over the years. Andy Ludwig, as I mentioned, I believe last time, had talked about how they want to do this in the right timeline, right? They're not going to rush it, but at the same time, you want to get these guys settled because next week, in theory, you need Cam taking a majority of those reps, and then you need that backup taking the rest of them. The other two, and then, Luke Batari, who's expected to be that fifth guy, they're going to get their own reps basically outside of the practice setting. They might get ones here and there, but it's more for the guys that are going to be playing, and as that two deep, the other guys will be working with scout team and some other scenarios. So it's a challenge. They obviously have to be prepared and ready, and they'll get occasional reps, but for the most part, it's Cam, and then 20%. I don't know what the actual demarcation is there, but the rest of those will go to your QB2. So we'll see how that goes. I honestly, I've given my opinion on who it is. I think Sam Heward obviously gives great upside in the sense that he's a guy that has done it. He's been at a Division I level, and it's been at the FCS level and some at Washington, but he's at least had some experience that way. His biggest problem, though, is he's coming into this really new, right? He doesn't know the system, and he's learning at a quick rate, and everybody loves who he is. Kyle said he's executing it, he says, pretty darn good given the situation because he wasn't here in the spring, but it's just a huge deficit not to be able to have that background, right? Brandon Rose has the most experience in the system, and he's been making progress over the years, and so has he made that next progress to give the coaching staff the confidence where he could be QB2? Isaac Wilson was, on paper, according to the coaching staff, I guess I should say, neck and neck with Brandon Rose. He's going to take that next step, and where does that go? Isaac is one of those most intriguing ones that, to me, I don't feel like they have to rush it, right? I don't think they have to rush to try to make him QB2 unless he's night and day different than anybody else. He can come into that system, lead the scout team, gain a lot of valuable reps that way, kind of go the Cam Rising model where you go lead the scout team for a year, get that insight knowledge with Andy Ludwig, go against the number one defense, really try to up your game that way, and learn the system that way in kind of like a harmless way. He doesn't have to worry about it that way, and then come in the next year and battle it out for the starting role. I think anybody that saw the spring game understands the kind of potential that he has. If you've watched him at Corner Canyon, you can see the potential. It's just at a different level, obviously. The game is much faster. Those windows are much tighter. But you see somebody that is going to not shy away from that. He's more than happy to be able to attack that. And I think you've got somebody that's generally willing to wait, right? Like he's not going to wait all day or for several seasons. But this is a guy that they feel like they can kind of project and kind of utilize in kind of the old system of QBs where you put him on the scout team, let them develop in the system, and then when it comes his time, he's ready to go. So we'll see how it goes. Curious to see how that separation shakes out, but it'll be interesting. We got an opportunity to talk to Sam Heward for the first time this week. Really articulate kid. He understands his situation right now. Obviously, he wants to compete and he wants to be that number 2 QB. But I don't get the sense that he would be devastated if not. I think he would still continue to fight, continue to battle for that job, knowing that he needs more time in the system. Obviously, he wants to see the field. Obviously, he wants to play. But I get the sense that he understands this better than many maybe would expect, and understand what's ahead for him. So I actually want to play the full interview that we did with him. It's about 4 minutes long. I don't generally like to do this because it's a long time. But I thought he had a lot of good things to say. I think he understands the situation very well and understands kind of the hurdle that he has to cross to be able to get to where he needs to. So I'm going to play that right now, and we'll kind of go to that point. Sam, how's it been so far being with Utah?
It's been awesome. I mean, this program is a machine. It's one of the best programs in the country, and it's just what a blessing it is every day to come here and compete with these guys and be around these teammates and grow with these guys and get to know them all and play for these coaches. It's pretty special. It's been awesome.
You had a lot of places you could have gone. Coming behind Cam, what was so attractive about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many reasons, why I wanted to come here. I mean, this place is one of the best programs in the country, like I mentioned, and, this place there's been a ton of great stability, and, they've proven so much here. And just the opportunity to come here in a great system and just compete and get better. I know coming here wasn't going to be easy, learning a tough playbook. Getting back up to this level, it takes some time to get back to this speed. But, I know I have such great people around me that are going to help me get there. And, I know this thing's a process. And like you said, at the end of the day, there's not many better people to learn from than Cam out there. And he's been unbelievable since I've gotten here. What a great mentor he is. And for me to come in here, just compete and push myself, also be able to pick his brain has just been awesome.
What did you mention, coaching stability was a big factor in your decision to come to Utah. But ultimately, as you look back at your time in Washington, what disappointment came from that, and how much did that influence your decision to ultimately come in here?
Yeah, honestly, looking back, it taught me so much. Was it tough? Definitely, yes. Was it tough to leave there? For sure. I definitely wanted to stick it out there and hopefully get an opportunity down the road, but I need to go play. I didn't really get a senior year of high school because of COVID. I hadn't played in 2 years. When Mike announced he was coming back, I knew I wasn't going to play, and that would have been a fourth year. And that's pretty tough as a quarterback. So I kind of had to make that move and go play. But, I definitely wanted to get back to this level. But just looking back on that whole experience at UW, going to Cal Poly, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's allowed me to be in this position now, knowing that this is a great opportunity. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. But I feel like all those things that I've gone through these past few years have prepared me to come in here and just compete every day and know that this thing is a process and know that when I get an opportunity, that I'll be ready to go.
Sam, you were one of the guys that went up to the youth reservation over the summer. How helpful was that in getting accustomed to what the culture is here?
It was awesome for me. I think I've only been to the state of Utah one time for an AAU basketball tournament in 6th grade. Before this, when I took my visit here, loved it. So being able to go do that and kind of see a different part of Utah and be able to learn more about, the Utes and this place and what this place means and be able to go help, those guys out and be able to work that camp was such an awesome opportunity. And me and Isaac had a great time working with the quarterback there. It was such a blast, and it was just overall, it was a great experience and, something I'm super thankful that I was able to go do.
How did Cal Poly help you grow as a quarterback?
I think just being able to be back on the field. I think when you go about 3 years without really playing, it can be tough. Part of you is like, can I still do this? I know I can, but, I want to have that feeling again. So just being able to go back out there and, be the leader of the team and, to go out there and just compete and go through some losses, some adversity and fight through it out there on the field was, the best thing I could have done. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that I got to go play for, my high school coach again for another year and, build some relationships with some of the, my best friends I'll have for the rest of my life there. And just overall, being able to go there, it's such a great place and just kind of have a little bit of a reset, take a step back, grow not just as a quarterback but as a person. It was just so beneficial looking back on it, and I'm really thankful for that experience.
What motivates you as a quarterback?
Honestly, I love the game of football. I just love being able to come out here and compete. And, when I turn on the tape and, these past few days here, it's like, man, I got such a long way to go. But, I know that I have the people around me to help push me, and I know that I'm in a great opportunity to just continue to just get better every single day. And, being a quarterback and waking up every day and having that challenge, does it get hard? For sure. But, I know that, I'm built for this, and the things I've gone through have helped prepare me to just know that this thing's going to, be a process. And, there's going to be some ups and downs to it. But, at the end of the day, you just got to keep pushing and keep working. And that's what I love about it, because it's not easy and it's hard. But, I wouldn't want it any other way, because I love to compete and I love to just push myself every single day.
What's your greatest strength right now as a quarterback, and maybe the thing you feel you need to work on the most?
Yeah, I think definitely, one of my biggest strengths, I feel like as a quarterback has been my deep ball and the ability to push the ball down the field with accuracy. I feel like I'm able to process and make decisions and be accurate with the football. And I think the biggest thing I need to work on here is just kind of, settling it down a little bit, just getting more comfortable. But, I'm running some new plays for the first time, going against one of the best defenses in the country at disguising stuff. And so, I know it's going to take some time, but just being able to be out here and just get better and really work on those things and the footwork and the timing and all that stuff, it just comes with the reps and it comes with time. And so, there's definitely a lot of things that I'm looking forward to continue to get better at.
It was a great interview with him. Obviously, as I mentioned, he's articulate. He understands the situation. Loves to compete. He wants to be able to be in that situation where he's fighting for the number 2 spot. This isn't a guy that's gonna be satisfied with anything less, but at the same time, he understands where he's at. He's coming into this late. He joined the program about a month before fall camp started, so there's a lot of time needed for him to really develop and get to where he needs to go. But there's a lot of optimism around him. Cam Rising said he was really fired up by seeing how well he's been able to do different things and how quickly he learns. The question is, how quickly can he learn that in a way where he's not thinking about it on the field, right? There comes a point where you understand how it works, but you've got to understand how it works in 3-4 seconds, where you're trying to diagnose what's going on with the defense, what the play call is, what the different things are going on, and he's obviously got a good mind for that. It's just a question of how can he do it in a way that's not going to make him kind of freeze up on the field, especially under Ludwig's system, which is pretty difficult, right? I mean, it's not an easy system, and you have to have somebody that's pretty cerebral and understands the system pretty well. So curious to see how that goes. Don't be surprised if Sam isn't listed as a QB2 when a depth chart comes out or when Kyle decides to make it known. But at the same time, he's got a lot of opportunity and potential ahead of him. So I'm curious to see how the coaching staff plays this and kind of where they put it in there. But, you hope for Utah's sake that they don't have to go into QB2 except for garbage minutes, that Cam is healthy and that everything will be well there. So obviously they want to have somebody set. They don't want to have a situation like last year where you're kind of scrambling to find a quarterback, and maybe that still happens depending on what happens on the field. Guys can be listed as QB2 and then they throw out QB3 for some plays. So really curious to see how that goes, and we'll see what Kyle says next week if he decides to give any information on that. Shifting over to running back right now. Running back has been a position that there's been a lot of, intrigue in, I'll say. I've seen a lot of fans really worried about this position group. I don't fully understand it. I don't think that there's really any concern here. And yeah, you want to have the guy that, you say is the Zach Moss or the Devontae Booker or, any of these guys that is going to be your bell cow back. But I don't generally get the sense that this is a room that is of concern, right? There are issues, right? There are things where you want somebody to be that guy. It just makes it easier. But Utah's got enough talent to be able to kind of mix and match what they want to do, right? They don't have to have that guy that's going to be, an every down back. They can have him be, every few downs, and then mix it in with somebody else that's an off speed or different ways to kind of mix up those packages. As of now, Kyle has said that Mekhi Bernard is that guy, and I don't think that comes as a shock to anybody. He's a guy that kind of comes in as the full, complete package in terms of being able to have good vision on the field. He's a great pass protector. He's, a good steward of the program. He's also a great receiver. He can catch the balls in the backfield. There's a lot that you can do with Mekhi Bernard that allows him to be kind of that complete back. But beyond that, they want the prototypical guy that's a bigger body, has something there. Somebody like that is a Mike Mitchell. There's been a lot of talk about him. Kyle had said on Monday that he's likely on his heels and really starting to emerge. It's not just a matter of, he can hit the holes hard or he can do different things that you think of as a running back. It's a whole complete thing with him, right? He's got to be able to be dialed in on and off the field. He's got to be able to pick up the pass protection stuff. He's got to be able to catch the ball. And granted, there's enough, talent, tight ends, wide receivers that you don't necessarily need that as a huge selling point. But running backs still have to catch the ball, right? There's still different plays and different things that you need them to do that. So, I want to see kind of how he develops there and what we're able to get there. But beyond that, they also moved, freshman Hunter Andrews over to running back. He was a linebacker, played both in high school, but Kyle has said he's shown really well. They moved him initially over because Jalen Glover was out the first week a little bit with some nagging injuries. He's back. He's been fine. But they mostly did that also because some of those younger guys, they don't have the frame. They're not as big. None of them are over 200 pounds. They need more big backs, right? They want guys that can be a little bit more of those, bigger bodies, just to be able to take the grind of the game. And Hunter is one of those guys. And in high school he rushed for over 1,000 yards. He's a guy that is able to do what he needs to. So curious to see how he develops into that system, if we get to see him a little bit. But for right now, I mean, that room is Mekhi Bernard, Jalen Glover, Mike Mitchell. Beyond that, it becomes a little bit more questionable, right? Charlie Vincent has gotten time as a walk-on, and Quinton Ganther had talked about in spring that, he's trying not to give him the ball. And the reason he's trying not to give him the ball is because he's a walk-on, right? Like, you've got to earn your role. And he said that Charlie keeps making plays to get that, right? Like, he deserves time on the field. So does he push for some of those minutes? We'll see. I can't imagine he's in that early rotation, but maybe he gets some. Dijon Stanley, John Randall, these are two other guys. They're the smaller framed guys, right? Like 178 for Dijon Stanley, 182 for John Randall. By all accounts, from what I've heard and seen, they're just not ready yet. They're not up to that level. They could be used. Dijon Stanley has a lot of speed, for example. Maybe you use him in a different variety of ways that the other guys don't. But it's one of those things where moving Hunter over really helped them to be able to kind of add some size to that room. But with that said, there's a lot of people that are concerned that, like, a Mekhi Bernard can't be that guy. That a lot of people see him as like a smaller framed guy. He's not the big guy. The reality is he's pretty much the same as most of these guys. Like, I was going through this to kind of check. He's listed at 6 foot. That may be a little generous. He's maybe close, and maybe you get that with the hair. But he's 6 foot, 206. Jalen Glover's 5'8", 202. Admittedly, he's smaller, right? But he's got kind of the frame, the muscle to be able to take on those things. Mike Mitchell is 6 foot, 211. He's much more actually the 6 foot. Dijon Stanley, 6 foot. John Randall, 6 foot. Charlie Vincent, 5'10". Most of these guys, they're about the same size. And so I wanted to kind of see the difference there. So looking at some of Utah's running backs in the past, the guys that, you would probably look at as saying were most instrumental in Utah's run success. There's other guys in there, and I'm not going to get into that. But you have Tavion Thomas, Zach Moss, Joe Williams, and Devontae Booker. The four guys that I would say probably were the closest to the bell cow backs that Utah's had over the last little bit. Other guys have mixed in there, the TJ Pledgers, Armon Shine, those guys, but they just didn't have those same reps as these other guys. Tavion, he comes in as the biggest guy, right? He was 6'2", 225. If anything, he was a little too big weight-wise. They were trying to cut some weight off of him, and there's some other issues there beyond that. He was your biggest guy out of that group. But all those other guys, Zach Moss, 5'10", 222, Joe Williams, 5'11", 205, Devontae Booker, 5'11", 212. These are the same size, essentially, as a Mekhi Bernard. Mekhi, he's put on some weight, and that's helped him. But, like, I don't think that there's anybody in this room that you look at and say, oh, they can't be a running back, they can't be the guy because they're small. If anything, they're all pretty on par with, some of Utah's best running backs over the last decade plus. And so I understand it's more that goes into the system than just that, right? Mekhi has to do more than just, pass protect, and he has to do more than catch balls out of the backfield. He's got to be able to take it to that next level. But I think you've got a room that they're comparable with anybody. It's just a matter of being able to, have that vision, being able to hit the line hard and be able to find ways to break through. That's what separated these other guys, right? Zach Moss could turn it on to another level where he absorbed that contact and then found ways to keep pushing beyond that. Joe Williams had that speed, and he could hit the hole and be gone. Devontae Booker, kind of similar to a Zach Moss type, where he could just bruise guys and run through you. That's where Utah has to take it to that next level, right? If they want to be able to have a run game that is comparable to what they've had in those years, they need somebody to emerge that way. There's not a worry here that they don't have guys that can do what they need to, right? There's enough talent in this room that it's going to work. They've got guys on tight ends and wide receivers that they're going to scheme it to whatever they need to be able to get the ball, whether it's passing or running, in a way that's going to be effective. This isn't going to be a situation where I envision where Utah just can't run the ball. Now, with that said, these last few years, it has been a little bit more rough. And I'm not going to even count last year because that was such an anomaly with the quarterback play and different things that way. But even the year before that, there was some stuff where you wanted more, right? Jaquindon Jackson obviously was able to do what he needed to do there, but it still wasn't to that level that Utah wanted. So with that being said, yes, Utah wants to push it. They want more. They need more out of this room, but I think they have the guys. They're going to be fine. It's not an issue, and I say that now knowing that we'll find out fully once it transpires on the field and whoever gets those reps. And I'm undoubtedly going to write an article probably about Kyle complaining about the run game. I can already tell, but that's just where we're at. I don't think that there's an issue here. I think they're going to be fine. This offensive side of the ball is fine. Kyle has talked about that they're really set on their offensive line. They have their starting five. They're playing together right now instead of trying to mix and match and figure out who their guys are. They have it set, and it's been essentially set since spring. So they've got some consistency. They've got camaraderie. All of those things matter in an offensive line, and that's going to help the running backs as well. All of this is going to play into that, right? You've got now tight ends. They're going to run 12, 13 personnel. That adds to it. You're getting a whole bunch of stuff where I don't think this run game is going to be an issue, right? I think it's going to take time to gel and do different things, but it's going to be fine. So I hope that helped talk you off the ledge. If you're worrying about that, I'm not the most articulate with some of that stuff, but I don't think there should be an issue here or a worry. It's really just a matter of how are they going to divvy up these things? Are they going to have a bell cow back, or is it going to be running back by committee? I would tend to believe that it's going to be running back by committee initially, especially through that SUU game, maybe that Baylor game. But once somebody separates, Kyle's more than happy to embrace him, right? Tavion Thomas was not the ideal back in terms of off-the-field stuff. He didn't really put in the work behind the scenes to do it, but when it came to being under the lights, he shined, right? He found ways to be able to make those plays, and so it was hard for Kyle to not play him. But at the same time, as we saw his last year with the program, there were things that he didn't do that forced Kyle to take him off the field. So I don't foresee that with any of these guys. That's not to say that something couldn't happen, but I think they're going to be in a good position, and everything should be good, especially with that offensive line unit that's together. I think you get Caleb Lomu, who's a redshirt freshman on that left side. He's been learning for the last year on what it takes to be a left tackle. Tanoa Toyai, left guard. He's been in that spot for a long time and really emerged last year. Jaron Kump, he's obviously experienced, understands what he needs to do at the center spot. Michael Mokafisi, outside of some penalties that he's kind of gotten that have hurt Utah, he's been a consistent force there. And if he can cut back on those penalties, I think you've got a phenomenal right guard. And then Spencer Fano moves over to right tackle. He played a lot of that in high school, and so he's more comfortable there. Did a phenomenal job at left tackle and was able to do what he needed to there. Obviously, he had some growing pains because he was a freshman, and you're going up against, in your very first game, Florida, guys that are going to be bigger, stronger, understand the game a little bit better just because of how long they've played, and he handled it well. So moving him to right tackle, they feel really confident about that. He feels really confident about it. He talked about it last week and said he's excited to see how it goes. So you've got that 5 set. They feel really comfortable with that. There's going to be some mixing and matching every once in a while, but he feels really comfortable with that. And then 6 through 10, they're kind of jockeying for position and trying to get there. But it's great for Utah to have that early consistency, gets them all working together. They jive well, gel together, whatever terminology you want to go with, it helps. All of that will help the running game. All of that will help, Cam stay protected. All that stuff helps. So outside of that, a couple names that we've been hearing. I guess one name especially is Caleb Lohner. We talked about this a little bit earlier. He's the basketball transfer, comes in is pretty much his last season, is moving over as a tight end in football. He's got a 6'8", 235-pound frame, although Freddie Whittingham says it's now up to 250. Regardless, he's big, right? So just from the intangibles and the measurables, he has what it takes to be able to be a prototypical tight end, if not a bigger tight end, that allows him to be able to do what he needs to do, especially in the passing game where he's pretty fluid. Coming as a basketball player, you're not tight necessarily. You have to be fluid. You got to be able to move. You got to use those hips. All of that translates really well onto the field, and he's put in the time to be able to do that. It's one of those things where he can do everything that they want him to do. Obviously, he has to learn the playbooks, has to learn how football to some extent is actually played. he hasn't played since 8th grade, so he understands football, but not to the level of a D1 athlete, right? And so he's learning that. The biggest knock towards him is and it's not even a knock, it's more just trying to figure out who he is once those pads come on, can he do it, right? Can he absorb hits? They're not afraid of him doing that. They say he's actually going to be fine there. He's good. It's more, can he put it all together when the pads are on? Can he make those catches, those same catches where I think it was Cam Rising said, you can put it anywhere in his direction and he'll find a way to get it low, high, anywhere. He's kind of like a sponge where he'll just absorb that ball and take it. Can he do that now with the pads? Can he understand the route structure and the timing? It's not a matter of just, okay, you're going to go run an out route. It's a matter of doing that with precision and timing, where you're going to set up Cam in a way that he can trust you and give you that ball. They feel really confident, right? Freddie Whittingham feels confident. Kyle Whittingham feels confident. There's a lot of optimism about where he's at. Freddie Whittingham said he has all the traits you look for in a tight end. He graded well in the summer. All of his skill sets, he said, those traditional NFL combine skill sets, he is elite. That's great, right? Like, you've got to be able to have those, and if he can get those translated with the pads on, Utah picked up a great asset, and he'll be one of 900 tight ends that'll be in Utah's system, and it'll be interesting to see how they mix and match this. They've talked about how they're going to have 12 personnel, 2 tight ends out. That's going to pretty much be their base offense, and you're going to mix and match that, right? Sometimes it's going to include Brant Keithy and some other guy. I can't even think there's so many of these guys. Landon King, for example, Carson Ryan, Miki Sugatoraga. You're going to mix and match these guys and put it in a way that works and schemes well for the team. With Caleb specifically, there's things where they feel comfortable, where if you can continually get him to understand the repetition of something, where you say, okay, your play is a 5-yard out route, 10-yard out route, whatever it may be that you want, they're going to be able to get it in a way that he understands that and then build from there, right? They can put him in those packages. They can do it. He can just be a tight end that's blocking. There's so many avenues for him, and they feel confident in whatever that is. So there's a lot of optimism there. Really curious to see how he develops. I want to see if if Kyle will give us any more about him next Monday after scrimmage. Is he involved? Those types of things. So really, really curious and excited to some extent to kind of see how that goes, because that's going to be a player that I think a lot of people are going to be fascinated by and wanting to see how he develops in the system. Outside of that, just a couple other names that have been watching. Teo Johnson and Smith Snowden. There's been a lot of talk about these guys on the defensive side of the ball. Secondary has been kind of the talk of the defense. There's a lot of faith in that front seven. This is a lot of returning guys, so there's not been a lot of talk about them. But in that secondary, Teo Johnson, who has to come in there and he has to fill the roles of a Cole Bishop, a Sione Vaki, he's got to kind of take those reins. There's a lot of optimism about him. Smith Snowden, who's going to be playing nickel primarily, and maybe some in safety or at corner. These two guys have gotten a lot of praise from their coaches, and there's a lot of expectations for them coming into the season. For me, those first few games, I want to see how they develop, right? Teo Johnson's played a lot more, and we've seen more of him, and so I don't know that there's a lot of doubt there. To some extent, even with Smith Snowden, because he's done it, but where can these guys take it to that next level, right? Can they impact the game the same way as a Cole Bishop, a Sione Vaki, the guys before them? Teo Johnson gets a lot of comps to Julian Blackman. Can he be that type of a guy, the ball hawk, but also lay the blow? We've seen him lay the blow, so that's not the question there. But what are their individual characteristics that's going to make them excel? So that'll be fun. We're going to learn that in a few weeks when we obviously see real football. But these are some of the names that they're talking about and guys that have been really making some progress. Guys behind them, though, there's a lot of optimism about them as well. They're just a little bit more unexperienced. They haven't seen the field. And so that's really where these next few days especially are going to help, where they're going to try to find out who is the guys to fill behind them. So that's essentially it for this week. We're going to get more updates next week, probably a lot better updates as now we'll have a scrimmage to go through. But right now, it's really just kind of gearing up for this season, right? There's not a lot of questions for this team right now. It's really just, can they live up to those expectations? Can they do what they need to with the target on their back? Kyle has traditionally run as the underdog mentality, and everybody's doubting us. Even when they're picked the favorite, USC was in the conference and Oregon was in the conference, and they're always going to be looked at as the top team. This is where Utah now has to really cement themselves and say, you know what, as the top dog, as the team to beat in the Big 12, we can do it. We won't know any of that really until the games start being played. But I think you really have to lock in right now, and not to the point where you're so prideful that you don't think you're ever going to lose. Utah found that out a few years ago, that you come into this, you start getting the momentums where you're beating teams by a lot of points, and then you start taking the foot off the gas a little bit. You start believing in your own press, and things change that way. This is kind of where Utah's going to develop that, and I don't get a sense that they're prideful about that. They definitely believe that they should be in the playoffs. They definitely believe that they should win a Big 12 championship. But how do they continue to put in the work? And by all accounts, everything that I've seen in the after periods, that's the only periods we get to watch. This is a team that is ready to go, and so excited to see how it develops. But we'll continue to add more to what's going on. Hopefully have some more things to talk about and get going. But we're getting closer. Football is really close, and I'm excited to see how it goes. So that's going to be it for today. We will come back again next week as we look more at recapping what happened in the scrimmage, and we'll kind of go from there. But I appreciate you listening, and we'll chat next week.